Hello and welcome to the Make Ideas Reality podcast. In this episode, I'm talking with Kieran Donnelly from Make, Fail, Repeat. We talk about his journey of becoming a maker and how he uses constraints to help him make his ideas reality, along with his philosophy of saying yes and how that leads to doors opening and amazing opportunities like being part of the HBO series Game of Thrones for over 6 years. In addition, we talk about taking risks and how that leads to personal and professional growth. There's a lot in this episode. I hope you enjoy. Let's do this. Today's guest is from Northern Ireland. I didn't know much about him other than his homeland. He started building RC planes and dabbling in animatronics. Then things went to hell, but he fixed it with Maker Hydroponics. If you ask him to do a favor, he'll say yes, because that's his ethos for success. Welcome to the show, Kieran Donnelly from Make, Fail, Repeat.
Cheers, man.
Dude, that was like hard. I can't believe I balls that intro up so many times.
I thought I'd be the one screwing things up tonight.
Well, you know, for those, obviously I've edited it out, but this is my fourth attempt at the intro, so there we go. Now, look, to be honest, I hadn't like really seen a lot of your work until I was scrolling through my Instagram stories and seeing sort of who's paying attention, because I always like to see sort of my community around, and I was looking at you, your name sort of came up over and over again. I thought, you know what, I don't know much about him. So I jumped in, had a look at your profile on Instagram, and I thought, you know what, let's bring him on and let's see what he's got to say. And here we are.
Well,
so
thank you very much for that.
It just shows you pay attention to people, and you know, all of a sudden you're on a podcast.
Well, to be honest, I'm the worst person in the world for actually promoting myself, so it's not surprising you hadn't naturally come across me.
I wanted to just go straight into it, and I wanted to sort of ask you sort of who's Kieran and what is he all about?
Right. Well, I am Kieran Donnelly. Everybody knows me as Make, Fail, Repeat. I'm a maker of things, and I have to use things as a catch-all because, like you say, you've seen my Instagram. Consistency is not my strong suit at all. So one day I could be building a 3D printed wind turbine, the next day I'm making wooden jewelry. So, but I like to try and share as much as I can with other people, on the off chance they might look at it and think, well, if that moron can do it, at least I can give it a go.
It's kind of like me. Like, I think if someone as retarded as me can pull something off, then there's got to be heaps of other people that can do something. So
yeah, it's giving somebody hope there somewhere.
And I think actually it's a great thing that you have diversity, because I mean, that's in some way, that's the maker way of life. You know, we do different things all the time. And I think if you're a one-trick pony, it kind of gets boring a little bit for not only your audience, but yourself too, right? So
that's it. You don't want to limit yourself to anything when you don't have to.
Exactly, yeah. So where did this all start for you? What's your origin story?
Right, my origin story. Well, I grew up and went to school in Manchester, where my mother's from. I spent most of my life here in Northern Ireland now. I didn't really get into making stuff until, I think, early 2000s. I had always wanted to get into flying RC planes. And around that time, things got cheap enough with the battery technology for electric planes and that. So I was still too much of a cheapskate to actually buy one. So I figured I'd start making them. So I cleared out my garage, got hold of some Depron foam and made some little foamy planes and really got into it. And then I saw these newfangled things called tricopters and quadcopters and now drones, as everyone calls them. And I thought I have to get me some of that. So I started building those. They, at the time, were all based on Arduinos. So I learned everything I could about microcontrollers and Arduinos and electronics, and then realized that cutting fiberglass and carbon fiber is an absolute pain in the arse. So I decided to build my first CNC machine. And again, controller based on Arduinos. So I was kind of taking some of the skills I'd learned from that over into that. And it all kind of snowballed from there, to be perfectly honest with you. About that time, a friend of mine, he's a sculptor and a potter. He was making fairy houses for people's gardens. And he said, hang on, Arduino's blinky lights. You could put some lights in this. So I started working with him. And he introduced me to another man who does light installations. He basically lights trees and forests as art installations. And he had this idea of setting up the forest beside his house as a Halloween trail one year. And he thought, I'll do the lights, and then Stephen, he can do the art direction and kind of set dressing. And he said, would you like to do like animatronics and maybe set up some interactivity with the lights and stuff? And I'd never done anything even remotely like that before. So I immediately said yes. And that took me down, I think 3 years we did that. That was just my baptism of fire into making, because that's exactly what it was at that point. Every kind of thing you could do, from mechanics to model making to electronics, all rolled in the one. So we did that, I think 3 years, but the first year was just fantastic because we just had as many ideas as possible. We tried everything. Almost everything didn't work. And then the date was getting closer and closer and closer. And so at the end, we just thought, right, what works? Let's focus on that and get some things done. And I had some fantastic projects that I will never forget. But unfortunately, that was back in the days before smartphones had cameras on and everybody would record it. So unfortunately, there's not a massive amount of a record of that.
I mean, I think what you told me about this before, and this sounded like really cool. Like
It kind of was, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, like you talked about having like magic wands that did like stuff,
Yeah,
and like there were actors and stuff on the trails as
yeah, well,
well.
that was it. We got a local theatre group, youth theatre group in, and they were acting out different parts. So the first thing you'd do, most of the forest was dark at the time, and you'd go and sit by a fire with a witch and a cauldron. And we'd found these Harry Potter wand and candle things in a cheap shop one day, and they were just a wand with an infrared remote on the end that you flicked it to turn the candle on, shook it to turn it off. So we wired those in through an Arduino to Walter's lights. So after the witch had told her story, you could just flick, and then the lights on the next path would light up. But I think my absolute favorite of the whole thing had to be Cyril the Severed Head. He was just perfect. He was my favorite actor in that whole thing. But basically, there was just a podium in the middle of the dark part of the forest with a light above it, and in front of a shallow grave. And I think it just said something like, "Here lies Cyril, beheaded for piracy in 1756," or something like that. And of course, whilst you were reading this, PIR sensors tripped, and then a few seconds later, all the lights go out except for one behind the podium. And then a severed head falls out of the tree on a rope with a speaker in its mouth and screams at you for a few seconds. And then a few seconds later, the lights come up and the head winds itself back up into the trees. But I think there wasn't a child in the town not having nightmares that night. I've never been more proud.
Oh, sounds awesome. Were you doing any of the modeling of the heads and things like that, or like?
Well, no. To be honest, for that, we were off the shelf scary heads. But Stephen was doing some brilliant things with the rest of the set dressing and stuff. But I did a few different things like that. We wanted lightning strikes to happen through the forest, so I got hold of some electroluminescent wire and built lightning strike shapes and had them flicker on, and a speaker system trip a kind of thunder roll just before. That was pretty cool.
Oh, I love it, man. Sounds awesome. And so you got into that sort of stuff, and then how'd you get into like 3D printing, and how'd you get into making?
Yeah,
Like,
well, it was a long time after that. I mean, just after that, I was by Walter, the guy who does the lights. He initiated me into the secret ancient order of the Tree Illuminati as their master of electricity. So I still every year do 2 or 3 installations with him. The biggest of which being the Stendhal Music Festival, where we light every tree on the festival site, and I try to do something interactive. So I think last year was a 20-foot tall light tower that I hid a video game in and didn't tell anybody about, which was brilliant. Just every now and then you'd pull a kid out of the crowd and say, "Hey, do you want a game?" And they're like, "A game of what?" And there was 2 buttons hidden in the posts, and you hold them in, and then you had to tap them as quickly as possible to race up and down. So I started making little things like that. That was brilliant. But it was much later on, I'd say around 2016. This was always something I'd done, as a side thing, kind of weekends here and there and stuff like that. Nothing I'd really taken seriously. And then in 2016, I had what was always referred to when I was young as a nervous breakdown. I'm sure there's some big fancy technical word for it now, but that's essentially what it was. I had a lot of things happen in short succession, and I started having panic attacks, and I couldn't leave the house without a pocket full of diazepam and stuff. But very luckily, I was in a position to get help. And the way the whole maker thing got set in my eyes was from just a meeting I had with a therapist. And she asked me essentially, who are you? Why are you here and that? And then she said, do you have any hobbies? And I said, I used to have a workshop there, and I'd build these things and do a couple of things. At least that's what I thought I said. What I'd actually done is gone on for a solid 15, 20 minutes about everything that I used to do and all these cool things and I make this, until she literally leapt out of the chair and grabbed me and just said, "Here, look, find a workshop, find a shed or a desk or anything and just make something, because that is very much who you are." And at that point, I'd never thought of it in any kind of serious kind of way, that it really was an important part of my life. And so as part of my kind of recovery from everything, I eventually built a workshop. Beforehand, because I only had a desk, I bought a 3D printer kit, and I thought, it's a good place to start with some new stuff. They're very similar to CNC machines that I've built in the past. So I built that and just started making stuff. Whilst I was doing that, obviously, I did what every maker says they do at the start, which is get on YouTube and start watching other people make stuff. So I came across the usual suspects of Jimmy DeResta and Bob Claggett and Brett McAfee, and then 3 million others. That the wormhole just got deeper and deeper and deeper. So when I finally did get a workshop, I thought, no, I'm going to put something on YouTube or something on Instagram and just try and share as much of what I'm learning as possible. And it spiraled from there. Then I met my now considerably better half, Shauna, who was in exactly the same boat. Always loved art and craft and stuff, and never took it seriously. And ever since, we just egged each other on constantly. Just a complete circle of encouragement. It's like, no, you've got to do this. No, you've got to do that. Which kind of gets crazy at times, because I think most people have to convince their partner to go and buy a laser cutter.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to her. She had Amazon out in 2 seconds. Like, oh, there's 3 of them here. You can get that one by the weekend.
That's so good.
And then we both went to Maker Central, and that was the whole "we are not alone" moment, where you suddenly realize that there are thousands of people in exactly the same boat, loving doing exactly the same things or completely different things, and that was a massive eye opener.
Oh, for me too. Like I've talked about 1,000 million times.
Yeah.
So I think anyone that hasn't been to an event like that needs to sort that out, because the community is so great. I just want to go a little bit back, and I found it really interesting that someone outside of yourself had to like kind of shake you out of your stupor and say, hey, you're actually like, you love making things, like you need to do that. And I found that super interesting.
Well, I think a lot of it was maybe, everybody has their own little neuroses and things, but I think especially with me, because I was going out and I was doing these things every now and then, and it was always seen as, that's, well, he's tinkering in his shed. It's kind of a trivial thing. That was a kind of the way I thought other people thought about it as well. And so you kind of tell yourself that over and over and over. And then sometimes it just takes somebody to slap you and say, no, this is a serious part of your life. You need to pay a bit more respect to than you otherwise would.
Mm. And I think too, like often people have a bit of a better perception of who you are because they're not listening to all those little voices that you have in your head.
Yeah,
Right?
they're not living in your head like you're living in your head.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, in some ways, having that therapist say that was able to like lift you out of that and move on with your life, which is really great.
And like I say, it must have been very evident because she said it was the first time she'd ever met me and she could plainly see. So,
yeah, I have a big problem with when I meet people, I often talk too much about it all because I love sharing and love sharing what I'm doing and yeah, that sort of thing. So I think a lot of my friends are probably like,
I think that's why we all end up at 3:00 in the morning in the Hilton at Maker Central, still talking to each other.
I was there at 7 a.m. still. Anyway, I think it's great that you managed to, get over that hurdle, and now you're sort of on this new journey, which is, after the whole breakdown thing, and seems to be on your way, and you've got a support network with your new better half supporting you with, laser cutter wants, all the other things. I mean, I think, like you said, I think a lot of people probably dream of that because convincing their wives or better halves to like, oh, we should invest in this. This tool.
In my case, it's like having the second devil on the other shoulder.
Where do you get your sort of ideas from? How do you work through your creative process when you're building something?
Usually, the big thing with me is looking at constraints. Starting with constraints. What do you have to work within? Probably because I just have one of those minds. Take me to a restaurant with a set menu and I'll go, oh, that was nice. Take me to a buffet where I can pick anything and I'm like, oh God, no, what do I do? So, when I'm making things like for the Halloween trail, that was fantastic because you had that constraint of time. Something has to be done and good enough to go by then. So I would just try as many things as possible, and the things that worked, yep, they're the things we went with. But if I'm like in my workshop here and I'm thinking of a project to do, I'm always looking, the biggest constraint around me is what do I have? What can I work with? Because I'm too damn cheap to go out and buy something. So I'm always looking around, what can I get my hands on? What do I have and what can I achieve with what I've got to hand? So that's a lot of it. Obviously, when 3D printers come into the mix, that opens it up a lot because at that point, it's what can you think of to make out of plastic? And that's definitely opened up that side of constraint. But yeah, it's definitely looking at what you're constrained with, what you can't do, and using it to force creativity to come up with something that you can.
Have you got any like examples where you could sort of say that like, okay, well, we had this idea and then,
Yeah. Well, I've come up with a couple. I mean, the idea I had with the wind turbine was I spend 3 weeks of a year living in a tent. I have solar panels on that tent, but I live in Northern Ireland, so they don't work. So I thought, right, a little portable thing, that'd be awesome. But I also put the constraint of I need this to be able to be made from stuff that most makers would have lying around. So that's why I went with the stepper motor. And then obviously I'm thinking from that mindset, obviously a 3D printer is there. So let's just 3D print as much as possible to go in this, buy the least amount of components and then throw a motor in it and go through that. But, some projects, it's not me that comes up with the constraints. So one that my good friend Dave got me into recently, you might have seen in my Instagram thread. Over here with the Catholic Church, if somebody passes away, they are buried within 3 days. And during this whole COVID thing, obviously you can't have big crowds at a funeral. So a prominent man locally died. He was very well known, big into the athletics club. And normally that would be a streets filled with people event. So the family asked, could you live stream this? And obviously they asked that on day one. We had 2 days to make it happen. So we went, let's look at the constraints here. It's a chapel out in the countryside with no internet, no Wi-Fi, no phone signal. There is broadband connection in the building next door. It's a church. You can't just go trailing cables all over the place and stuff like that. And try as we might, GoPros are fantastic, but we could not get their Wi-Fi streaming to work at all. So with about 1 day to go, we're like, right, what can we do here? So I came up with the idea of getting a USB webcam into a Raspberry Pi, using the Raspberry Pi to Wi-Fi to the laptop. The laptop then plugged into a really long cable coming from the house next door. And so that's the way we got it working. And then that grew into what we're calling the Dave Link now, which just takes a HDMI in and streams over a network, so you can have a wireless camera going into OBS Studio for streaming. So yeah, constraints are a big part of my process.
Yeah, because I often put constraints on myself. Like in a lot of the projects I put on my project list are like, I don't like to go and buy new things. Like
Yeah,
I like to find materials I found in the bin, or someone was throwing out, or something on at least majority of the build. The sofa beer fridge was an exception, but now that I've finished that project, I think just going back to where my core roots are, it actually feels more rewarding to like put those constraints on, because you tend to think more creatively when you have constraints.
yeah,
You start to think, okay, well, what can I do with what I got? And that pushes you within reason, of course, to make something interesting.
yeah. And
um
like you say, it forces the creativity
mm.
because, like they say, necessity is a mother of invention. Like if you have to do something under these constraints, you have to be creative to think of what.
And what about things like when you're under that time constraint and like things go wrong, right? Like that also, I feel like that also is something that is a really good character building, process, within the creative process. So like, for example, you told me a story about where you had this light tower, and then, something happened, the Arduino blew up or something, and
Yeah,
I had to run around it and find a new one, get it all sorted, and like make it work.
well, that's it, because when you have a deadline, it has to be done. And the worst part of that story is obviously it's entirely my fault. I was at the top of a 20-foot tower with an ESP 8266 board programmed, ready to go, and then I plugged the power in backwards. The magic blue smoke escaped, and then yeah, so I had to fix that quickly out in a field. So I brought spares with me at least, but running around, and obviously you have to flash the board and then get it back in. I hadn't been smart and made it so you could just plug this board into the rest of the thing. So desoldering had to take place,
Oh
and
no.
yeah, version 2 definitely had a socket.
I used this, mine. I just use a breadboard, and I found that was so much easier because I pulled that thing apart. I don't know how many thousands of times,
Yeah,
you know, and I really got to know it though. That's a great thing about it. And it was a really great, rewarding experience to try something completely new, which I'd never tried. I'd never done programming before. I never played with Arduinos, never played
mm,
really with anything like that. So it was a really great experience. So, and I took a risk in trying a big project like that. Like I really just jumped all in, not knowing actually if I could pull it off or not. And I that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, like taking risks. Your whole make, fail, repeat, your Instagram handle, for me, it's that's like that's who I am as well. I fail, and I repeat that. Like
Yeah,
not
that's the
I
process.
don't repeat the fail, but I well,
Oh, I usually
sometimes I
repeat
do.
the fail a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what's your opinion on taking risks and
I
jumping
think
jumping in?
it's just necessary. Um, you have to just do it. Um, you know, and I think once you started the project, you could sit and you could think for hours and try and guess all the thousands of things that are going to go wrong. And by the time you've done that, you're in the mental state that you just don't want to do anything at all. So you have to just throw yourself in. Um, I've always found this whole idea of, oh, I don't think I can do that, kind of. Well, that's kind of the point. If you don't think you can do it, go and do it. Because if you don't do it, you'll never do it. So you have to take that risk of saying, right, no, I'm just going to go. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to do this. Um, Sometimes it works out well. Sometimes it doesn't work out well at all. But nothing happens at all if you don't just jump for it.
Yeah, because I was saying to Gus last week that, for me the biggest hurdle is actually just getting out there. Because when I'm not in the workshop, it feels like everything's falling apart, and I don't want to face the failure that's gonna happen. But when I'm in there and I'm actually dealing with a failure, I feel free and like alive, because I'm
Yeah,
just trying something new. And I think taking that risk of trying something new, developing your skills, developing your confidence as well, like often pushes you and develops you, like as a maker, as a person, in all aspects.
yeah.
Um, you also talked about like the fact that you use your holidays to go do like
Well,
installation projects with your friend, like that's
that's
something that I wouldn't see as a holiday necessarily.
well. It depends on your point of view, really, isn't it? Some people like lying on a beach in Spain. I like living in a tent in a field and building massive light installations, or high altitude electricity, as I call it. But yeah, I mean, again, not everybody can get away with that. I mean, I have a family, but they're very, very understanding, and they like to come and join in as well. So that always helps.
Yeah.
Um, and let's face it, it's cheaper than Spain.
Yeah. And in some ways more fun for you, right? Because there's a
A
reason
lot more
why.
fun, yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason why you're doing it. And like, do you feel like you're often saying yes to a lot of things?
Yes, yes, I say yes to almost everything, and that that can take you to some wild and crazy places. It can also get you in a lot of trouble. You have to check on that quite a lot. But as soon as you say no to something, the story ends, and there's just no fun in that. Nothing more will happen. But if you say yes to things, especially things you've never done before, that's something, somebody comes to me and says, here, do you want to try this? And it's something I've never done. There is very little chance I'm going to say no, because I want to go and experience something new. It's got me in trouble in the past saying yes to too many things, because you don't want to, say yes to one thing and end up, oh, I can't do it because I said yes to something else. But so I'm trying to keep that in check at the minute. But yeah, and obviously you want to say yes to things that kind of match where you want to go with things. Match your kind of wheelhouse. Not too much, obviously, but I'm not going to say yes to joining the Royal Ballet because I just don't think I have the legs for it. But if somebody says, "Here, do you want to come and live in a field for 3 weeks and build lighting installations?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good point. Like you can say yes to everything, but if it's not aligned with who you are as a person, that's where you get yourself in trouble, right?
yeah,
Like, so it's knowing when to say yes, but be very open to say yes all the time when it's aligned with
when it
with
fits
you.
that
Yeah.
that yeah.
Because like saying yes often leads to like more opportunities and growth. And I think also like you mentioned, like yes leads to doors opening, and a no is the door closing. Like
That's it.
you can't
Yeah.
open that
No
again.
is the end of the story. Yes
Yeah.
can take you anywhere. And I have to say, it's taken me to some pretty crazy places in the past.
Yeah, like what sort of things have you said yes to and they've kind of like changed your trajectory, or allowed you to like get opportunities you never really had before, or
Yeah.
even just grow like personally?
Well, I'd say the biggest, certainly in my mind, opportunity that I ever got from saying yes is one day somebody dandered his way into the pub and said, "Here, do you want to look at that?" And saw an audition form for something. So I thought, yeah, I'll go and have a look at that. And that led me to spend 6 years off and on working on a really tiny TV show no one's ever heard of called Game of Thrones. So yeah, that was a big door that opened. And
Jesus.
I mean, now to be fair, I want to put it in context because you think, oh yeah, oh my God, he got in Game of Thrones, but you know, half of that show was filmed in Northern Ireland. If you had long hair and a beard, you were in that show. There was no two ways about it. Like, we all got in the show at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had great fun doing everything from being a servant in Winterfell to Night's Watch to all sorts of stuff. I mean, I can remember the form they sent out, you know, has a million questions of, you know, can you do this? Can you do that? And I remember one of them was, do you have nautical experience? And I'm like, yeah, I canoed down the Bann once. Of course I do. So I ticked that box and ended up rowing cork boats out of Ballantoy Harbour, trying to get Yara to escape the Iron Isles for a season and a half. So yeah, saying yes just take you to crazy, crazy places.
Yeah, but I mean that experience too, like, you know, just I think probably from even like just a maker standpoint, like seeing the costumes and things that went, you
Oh
know, the
man,
detail that went into like the set
this
design,
is
the
it. The set design especially, but everything. I spent most of the time you spend sat on your ass waiting to be called. So I was looking at everything. And I'll never forget Castle Ward is where we filmed Winterfell for the first few seasons. And I knew Castle Ward because I'd done lighting installations there previous. And I knew the place, like, and I still couldn't work out what were part of the real castle and what were the sets that they built along. And I found myself one afternoon just going around knocking on walls to see if they were made out of fiberglass.
wow.
Yeah. And then I spent a long time looking through the prop department and everything you could see to try and, oh, right, oh, that's how they did that. That's awesome.
And was there any other things that happened on set that were like interesting or funny?
Well, yeah, my most mortifying day on site, I'd say. Like I say, resting on set is what you do 90% of the time, just sat in your ass. And in the first season, I hadn't read the books. So I had the paperback stuffed down my trousers for the whole fucking thing. Like, and I remember sat one day reading the book, and one of the other extras sat down next to me. There was another guy over beside. I hadn't paid him any attention. And the extra said, "Here, oh, is that the first time you read the book?" And I'm like, "Yeah. What do you think?" So I said, "Yeah, no, it's good, it's good. You know, these chapters about Sansa. I mean, God, they just go on and on and on. You could scrap half of that, and it'd still be a good book." And it basically just went on to tell him my honest opinion of the book. And then this other guy got up and kind of turned away, and I caught sight of the extra's face beside me, and he said, "You know who that was, don't you?" And I'm like, "No." And he grabbed the book out of my hand, flicked to the back page, and there's a picture of George R. Martin, the man who just sat 6 foot behind me listening to me shit all over his first book.
Oh my God.
I was completely mortified. I was like, oh, God, no. But I'm thinking either he didn't hear a word, or he has, you know, he just took it in his stride and appreciated my honesty, because I got to work on that show for another 6 seasons. So it worked out well for me.
Well, you probably blended in with all the bearded guys, so he just didn't know
Well,
who
yeah,
was
this
who,
is
you
it.
know.
I could be anybody.
Oh my God. Well, how's that for luck?
Oh, that's just my luck, I tell
Well, so Game of Thrones, I mean, for a lot of people, that like that was 6 years of, or 7 years of pretty much. Well, it was 8 years, wasn't it? Because there was a year between waiting for
Yeah,
the last season, which everyone was
yeah.
pissed off at.
I'd just like to point out as well, I worked on the first 6 seasons. My fingerprints are nowhere near that last one, just in case anyone's wondering.
Fuck it up. I seriously, yeah, let's not get into that. But oh
Yeah,
my god, no, I don't think there's a single person in the world that liked the way that
no,
series ended. So,
yeah.
yeah, I love the fact that saying yes brought you onto the set of Game of Thrones. I think that's really cool. I mean, too, but saying yes though, like, has that also opened doors in the maker world as well for you? Like,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. After Maker Central, meeting everybody there and suddenly realizing, hang on a minute, you only live down the road from me. And I met people like Rab, the Very Angry Maker, and he called me up a few weeks ago, and he's like, I bought a CNC machine. Help. So I'm like, yes, yes, absolutely. So I went down and spent a couple of weeks down with him, tinkering and showing him everything I could think of and stuff. And the opening the doors to the community kind of thing is a fantastic thing. I'm kind of worried now that everybody in the community is going to say, "Hang on, man, ring Kieran, he'll say yes."
yes, Kieran the yes man.
Yeah. But yeah, and I like to say now, because I am kind of known for it now as well. I have people. There are certain people who just, like, with the fact that they know I'm going to say yes, I'll help, and B, the fact that they know I love working to a deadline and under a bit of pressure, they're like, right, okay, yeah, Kieran, we'll call him. He's going to be good for this project, and I absolutely love it. I just sit waiting for the call. So yeah, it can definitely open doors, windows, everything.
I love the fact that people will often ask you to do something because they see the potential in you. They see the potential that you are good at something and that you can add something to whatever they're doing, like their project,
Yeah,
their whatever. You do get the occasional people that are sort of, the leeches who kind of just want something for nothing. But I think often if you say yes to a lot of things all the time, you hear it straight away if they're like sort of,
yeah.
those type
Oh,
of
you,
people,
you
right?
can spot them a mile away, like, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah. And to be honest, they're, generally people wise, as a yes, they're all over the place in the maker community. I just don't see that at all. Everybody just seems to be cool as fuck. Like,
Why? I wonder why, because we keep on talking about this. I mean, it's all over other podcasts as well, the Maker podcasts, why our community is so actually good. Have you got an insight to why we are so actually nice to
I
each
don't,
other?
I don't know. Well, it might be just something to do with the process. If when you spend a lot of your time alone in a workshop working on something and solving these problems and getting frustrated, and then you come across other people who are the same, and you're like, well, he goes through the same shite that I do every week as well, and it's like I'm not going to put anything else on his shoulders. So it could be that kind of mentality. I don't know, but no, everybody is just nice.
Yeah, I think maybe it's like character trait of being a maker, like because I've talked to other people about the artist world, and they're like dog eat dog. They'll kick you
Yeah,
when you're down. So I mean, it's not just creatives that are nice to each other. It's very clear that artists sort of it will step on you to get ahead.
but again, I think in the artist community as well, artists are very good at that whole. This is my thing. I'm an artist at this. The
Mm.
idea that you would be a maker at lots and lots of different things. It's like the jack of all trades kind of thing. They maybe look down on and stuff, but I think maybe just the fact that we're that open to all of these other different things, it just builds that kind of character in people.
Where do you find inspiration for your projects? And like, you're building some of these cool things for like, the light installations. You're also building like fun things like windmills and stuff. When you go searching for inspiration or you're not sure what to do for a certain problem, like where do you go? What do you do?
Um, well, the internet is a very big place, so
Yes.
I do go down rabbit holes. One of my favorite places to go down a rabbit hole is hackaday.com. If you want to do an electronics project or something like that, you could just look through that for years. But I also like to go to people as well. I'm always asking friends, you're like, what should I do now? What do you think? Give me a suggestion. Just throw something at me and I'll take it from there. That kind of way.
Mm.
Um, and there's lots of other people out there. I mean, I mentioned Stevie, the guy who introduced me into the whole thing at the Halloween trail, and that he's a potter and a sculptor. He's just fantastic. I want to just find out where he gets all of his creativity from, because every week he's making a new thing, and he's, in fact, I'm going to have to shout him out as well. I finally got him onto Instagram. So if you don't mind, it's Keltoi90, KELTOI90, and his stuff's fantastic, but he's not into this Instagram thing, so we have to give him a bit of encouragement, But he's brilliant. He for years he's just come out of the woodwork every now and then, said, "I'm working on this. Can you help?" Or here's a thing you've never done before. Do you want to just But for inspiration, everywhere is the answer to the question. To be fair, just look everywhere you want to look.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know if I shared this before, but I often ask non-creative people for input, weirdly, because often they have a real like weird way of thinking about things, and sometimes you get answers where you're like, "What? uh, what? No! Like, did you understand what I asked?" But sometimes that same answer where you're like, "What the? No, how?" And that'll get you thinking on a different track,
Yeah,
and then from that the solution comes to a problem or something you are having a challenge with, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Just getting a
find,
perspective as far away from your own as possible.
yeah. So I remember I often ask my brother-in-law some questions sometimes, and he'll just like go on this random like ideas train, and it have nothing to do with the problem I've actually asked him about. But I do that on purpose because his ideas train sometimes comes with these weird and wacky ideas, which makes my brain make other connections,
Yeah,
which then finds the problem or solves the problem, I should say. So I use that a little bit for inspiration as well. So, but you talked about shouting out. What was his name again? I'm really sorry.
Stephen.
Stephen. Is there any other creative heroes that inspire you?
Um, well, like I say, everybody. I would hate, especially maker community. I'd hate to pick anybody out. Like, I mean, Rab, I absolutely adore for the simple fact that he is uh, an example of what you can do with such a tiny little space, because he makes the most amazing arcade machines, like absolutely pristine, with all the designs, all the vinyl graphics for them, and the light board at the top and everything. And when he invited me down to come and see the place, I was shocked. It's his workshop's half the size of this room I'm in now, and he manages to just pull out these absolutely pristine arcade cabinets. And that in itself is an inspiration, when you sat there thinking, oh, I don't have room to do this. And you're like, no, you really do have room to do this. You just have to be a bit more creative about how you use it.
Yeah. Yeah, I often think like, oh, I don't have enough space if I'm going to make this garage into a proper workshop. But yeah, I've just got to think creatively instead of being so square about it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, any cool tips or tricks you want to share with the audience that you think would be cool?
Yeah. In fact, I'll do one specially for you, Justin, because I know you very recently popped your 3D printing cherry, as I say.
Yes.
So yeah, one. It's been controversial, to be fair, with this one, but uh, getting a print to stick to the bed when you want it to stick to the bed and come off when you don't, is something people have battled with a long time. And I know some of the high-end printers have these like magnetic plates that you can take off and bend and all of that.
Yep.
But if you just have a heated glass bed like me, the best thing I've ever found is just get yourself an old sauce jar filled with hot water and dissolve as many teaspoons of sugar into it as possible before it stops dissolving. And then just keep that near the printer, heat up the bed, wipe it over with a piece of blue towel, and then let it dry. And literally everything will stick to that for maybe 4 or 5 prints. And as soon as the bed cools, it just falls off as if it was never stuck. So that is my top tip.
So say that again. So you put like a sugar solution on the glass.
Yep, just a thin wipe over, and then let it evaporate. And like you say, when it's hot, I've had it with PLA, PETG, ABS. I've had it work as long as you have a heated enclosure, but it just sticks perfectly for the bottom layer. And then as soon as it cools, whatever happens, the way it contracts, it just pops straight off.
Is there any like side effects to it all? Or, like
No, not that I've found. I mean, no, I don't think I've had nozzles clog any more than they used to, or anything at all. I thought you might get a bit of a build-up over time, but because you're wiping over the whole thing every 4 or 5 prints, you just have a very fine layer of it. And no, I haven't found any downsides yet.
Oh, sounds awesome. I did that. There you go, people. That's a hack. 3D printers. You don't need this crazy magnetic like flexi thing, which I've seen everyone seem to use. There you go, sugar water. Boom. Let's go into rapid fire 5. You ready?
Mhm.
Fill in the blank. Creativity is.
Creativity is making something new from things you thought you already knew.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I often like find things that I thought I knew, and then I sometimes just flip it, and then I can find another way of looking at it. And I think that is creativity through and through. Love it. What's something people get wrong about you, Kieran?
They think I know stuff. Mainly, they think I know what I'm doing. I get that one a lot. People say, well, of course you could do that. You know how to do that. And I'm like, well, no, but I didn't when I started. I only do now because I did it. So that's something I get a lot of.
Like that's the same for me. Like people think I'm actually good at making stuff, and I just
Little do they know.
have you seen my videos? Have you seen how many things that folds up? Like I only get there because I have like persistence and stupidity, like to prevail. Like yeah. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not making stuff?
Um, I would like to say something, sensible, like, read books and literature. But no, I play video games. I absolutely love playing video games. My favorite addiction at the minute is Sea of Thieves, because every little boy wants to be a pirate. So yeah, that's what I do when I'm not doing anything else.
Maybe that's Brett's new game.
Yeah.
What project is completely priceless that you could never sell?
Now that's kind of a tough one, because to be honest, when I make something, once it's made, I don't really care what happens to the thing itself, because the skills and the knowledge I learned along the way, I get to keep that forever. So the actual thing in the end, I'm not really too bothered about. So I'd have to say there isn't anything.
And I find that really interesting because, like, I kind of feel the same way for a lot of my projects now. The only real project like I wouldn't never sell is my daughter's soapbox car, which was kind of like the first major project that I did,
Yeah.
like when I, started making, like, or jumping on this maker journey, like I think that for me was like the tipping point to go into this creative, you know, road that I'm on now, like that project. So there's like a sense of nostalgia to it. Plus, it's for my kids and all that sort of
Mm.
thing. So like, I feel like I couldn't sell that because it's probably something that will stay in the family for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'd have trouble anyway because I don't think anyone would want to buy anything I make. So,
I'm going to ask the last hard question. Are you ready?
go for it.
What does happiness look like?
I would say happiness to me, to everyone else, would look like a room with far too many laser cutters in it.
Yes. I think the reason I probably want to ask this question because I feel like, for me, like I'm always on a journey to find happiness over like money or anything like that. And I feel like this maker journey, this creative journey I'm on now has been like the right direction for happiness. But I definitely feel like, I'm not quite there because I've still got ties to things that I,
Yep.
hold on to from the past, and I need to like get over that stuff.
I
I
absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, so I feel like, like even just releasing new videos this week, that feeling of like not being good enough or not enough or whatever, you know,
Yeah, the
it,
imposter syndrome.
yeah, it comes back, and it's stupid, but like it does affect your mentality of how you look at the day. Even like, I remember, like, I think it was like Tuesday or something, and I was like, the video hadn't got any views, and I was just like, I was a bit bummed. And I was asking myself, like, actually, why are you bummed? Like, no one, like, who cares that the video didn't get any? Like, it was for you, the project, in the first place. So yeah,
Yeah,
so I often ask myself a lot of questions. So and
yeah,
hopefully I can find the answers so that I can actually turn that around and actually focus on my happiness rather than like monetary value or
yeah,
even like even being liked by others, right, within the community. So
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I would say my habit. I wouldn't know what it actually is in the end, but I'm slowly working towards it. And you can tell every time you make a change to your life that you know is good, you definitely feel it. So I recently went part-time at work so I could do a little bit more making, spend a little more time around the house. And, it's a big sacrifice in wage, but man, you instantly knew that that was the right call. It's so much baseline happiness is just so much higher than it was. So yeah, I might not know what it's going to be in the end, but I definitely know when I'm working towards it.
Yeah, man. And I felt the same way when I started working less at my day job. Like I just felt in some ways free. I felt
Mm.
pressure though, unfortunately, because I felt like, oh, like I've got this time now to do making stuff. I better make,
Yeah,
and then when I didn't feel like I did enough, I felt bad, that I didn't do enough. So I think I have to be very careful with how I think about what I achieve and what I accomplish in those days and not get trapped into this whole thing or
yeah,
how much I did in the time I got.
yeah. I think we all battle with that one. With the
Mm.
whole, anyone who has a set amount of time to be doing that kind of thing, you're constantly thinking, "Wow, did I waste that? Could I use that time a bit better and done a bit more?" But you do what you can do.
Yeah, exactly, man. Um, we're going to wrap this up, Kieran. Anything you want to give the audience to take away from today's show?
Well, if I could tell people anything, it would be don't sit looking at a problem, do it and wonder how you fixed it. It's a lot easier.
I love it.
Uh, Basically, my biggest problems I've ever had are sitting thinking, what could go wrong? And then you get in the mindset of thinking of everything that could go wrong. And by the end of that, you don't want to actually try and do anything. So I would say, forget thinking about it. Just dive in, do it. Start with the first part, screw it up a million times until you get it right, and then move on to the next.
Take the risk and say yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you, man?
You find me make, fail, repeat pretty much everywhere. YouTube, on Instagram, makefailrepeat.com, and pretty much anywhere else the cool kids hang out.
Cool, man. I just want to say thanks, Kieran. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for giving us some interesting things to think about. I know that I feel like I'm going to say yes to a lot of more things that definitely align with who I am. I want to say thank you also for everyone for listening. If you want to support the show, be sure to tell a friend. Otherwise, you can support the show just as much by smuggling this podcast onto Tom Cruise's rocket ship as he gets jettisoned into the orbit of Earth. And then hopefully you can jam all the incoming signals and communication and just play this podcast. And so Tom Cruise goes insane. Or you could just get a tattoo across your face of the Make Ideas Reality podcast logo. That would be ace. Thanks everyone for listening. If you want to give me some feedback, please DM me at Garage Avenger on Instagram. Very, very open for all your feedback. Until next time, keep pushing yourself, keep ballsing up things, keep learning, get inspired, and I'll catch you on the flip side. We're out. Thanks, man. Appreciate
No worries, man.
Appreciate the time.